So I'm talking today with Julie Hooper, the Vice Chancellor for University Development and Alumni Relations and President of the UC Berkeley Foundation here at UC Berkeley. Hi, Julie.
Hello.
Thanks for sitting down with me today to share your leadership story.
Happy to do so. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. So can we start with a quick synopsis of your career path and how long you've been at the University of California?
Sure. I've been here 4 years. I came here from Austin, Texas. I lived in Austin close to 20 years. My career path is an interesting one. I think everybody in development and fundraising has a unique path to get to this place. You don't go to college and usually say, my job prospects are to become a fundraiser. I went to undergraduate to Boston University for my undergraduate degree in history. And when I graduated from Boston, there were no jobs. There was a recession going on the East Coast, and I moved back home to Dallas. I did not want to go back to Dallas, but there were jobs in Dallas, and I ended up working in the textile industry, actually, and did a lot of work in India, which was fascinating.
Wow.
And that's the first place where I actually had a management career as well. It was very interesting work. But I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, and I also knew that I wanted to live in Austin. And at that time, I had a choice. I could go to work for the state of Texas, for the Texas Historical Commission, or I was offered the position as the executive director of what is now called Preservation Austin. And the first thing I realized when I got into the job was fundraising is going to be a major component of my job. And I know about foundations and grant writing, and I know a little bit about membership, but I really don't know fundraising. And so I joined the Association of Fundraising Professionals, the Austin chapter. And that's how I learned fundraising. I learned it from my peers. I learned it from going to conferences. I learned it from reading books. I learned it from having mentors in the nonprofit community, from my board, and just doing the work as well. And it was funny because I wasn't looking to work for a university. In fact, I had a sort of aversion to working for such a large institution. UT Austin has 50,000 students. I mean, it's an enormous institution, and I really felt my heart was in the nonprofit sector. But the more I met with faculty and met with the staff and met with the then vice president for university advancement, a guy named Rick Eason, I became convinced that I would actually probably enjoy working at a large university in a small unit. And so I took the leap and moved over to UT Austin. And I guess, as they say, the rest is history. What sold me on Berkeley, along with the prestige of Berkeley's brand and everything Berkeley stands for, is the people. The people I met. I became convinced that this would be a really great home for me and that I could really add value. And it's been a wonderful 4 years.
Nice. Well, I had a similar experience of how I learned my business of learning and development, doing the work and getting involved in my professional association, the local chapter when I lived in Tampa, and going to the conferences and meeting other professionals in my field, and that's a similar way that I started out. So it seems like there's some good career advice in there,
definitely,
to help people think about how to learn their field.
And you proactively probably reached out. No one said to you, "This is how you do it."
That's right.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And when people ask me about getting started in this business, I feel that mentoring and your peers, just the best thing you can do is network with peers. And mentoring doesn't have to be formal, right? It doesn't have to be I sit you down and I say, will you formally be my mentor? I've had a lot of people who have informally mentored me in my life, and they probably don't even know that I think of them that way, right?
It's nice if you tell them, though.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
So, Julie, what kind of defining moments have occurred in your life or your career, and how have they shaped you?
Wow, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Defining moments. Gosh, there have definitely been defining moments for me. Some of them easy, some of them hard, some of them positive, some of them not so positive. I mean, I was very fortunate to travel to India and to work in the textile industry in India, right? Not many 20-year-olds get to do something like that. And we produced home textiles for companies like Pure One and Spiegel and Linens and things. It was fascinating, and I got to travel all over the country. But I saw some, not just the extreme poverty and environmental degradation in India, but I saw things with, kids working in factories and things like that. Some of these are very, very small factories. I put that in quotation marks, but it was just culturally so shocking to me And I can remember traveling to some small villages to visit some of our vendors, and I was with some of my colleagues from our home office in New Delhi, and I saw these young girls, they were probably 7, 8 years old, and they were there cutting the fringes on rugs that were going to the United States. And I just said, wow, I can't believe they're not in school. And my Indian colleagues looked at me and said, what schools would they go to, right? Mm-hmm. I think at some point I had to just walk away from that business and set myself on doing something else. And maybe that's part of what drew me to the nonprofit sector, right? I think you choose to be in the nonprofit sector because you want to be in business that gives back to the world.
Of service.
Yeah, of service, exactly.
So we've talked about the draw to nonprofits is that service orientation of the work. So what do you see in terms of the work you do here, and what's the service piece of that?
Well, commencement was Saturday, and I volunteered for commencement. A coworker and I, we stood at the north end zone at the entrance to shepherd the students in to get them seated. And there is nothing that makes you feel more amazed by the work you do here at Berkeley than attending commencement and being down there and being there with the students. Nice. And thinking about what they're going to go out there and do with some of it we can't even imagine, right? The impact that this group of students will have on the world. So for me, whenever I'm having sort of a hard day or a challenging time here at Berkeley, going and spending time with the students always puts a big smile on my face.
Reminds you what we're doing here.
Absolutely. We met with the Daily Cal editorial board about a month ago. One evening we spent 2 hours with them, and it was just, it was fascinating. And again, it was an amazingly smart group of young people who want to change the world for the better. That to me is the draw of higher education. I myself, my mother went to nursing school. My dad attended college but didn't graduate. So getting my undergraduate degree and then getting a graduate degree was a really big deal for me. And for me, I am incredibly grateful for what higher education has meant for me in my life and what it's enabled me to do. And I know some people question the value of higher education. We've heard about some recent surveys. I think it's the Pew Charitable Trust did the survey last fall about how Americans' perception of higher education, and there's a political split over how people value higher ed. But I just can't imagine what my life would have been like if I hadn't had the opportunities to go to school. And so I don't forget that, right? And I truly believe in the value of higher education. I truly believe that American higher education is one of the great differentiators of our nation from other parts of the world. And I think that it's played this phenomenal role in what America is, what America has been, where America's going. And I feel empowered by that. So you have to remind yourself, though, when you're an administrator at a large institution like Berkeley or the University of Texas, you have to remind yourself to go spend time with the students.
Well, it's a good reminder for those of us that don't work directly with students.
That's right. Yeah.
Or in more support roles or administrative functions, that to not lose sight of what's important here are the students and to try and connect with them somehow.
Yes.
So I think you've started talking about my next question, which is about what core beliefs have guided your choices and actions. And you talked about the value of higher education, maybe that's one. What else would you say to that about core beliefs for you?
Yeah, a great question. I am a believer in karma. So I feel like what goes around comes around, and it's important to remember that. And when I was putting myself through graduate school, I was a waitress and a bartender. When I was an undergraduate in Boston, I also waited tables, and nothing teaches you more about human beings and interacting with human beings than being on the wait staff, right? And I think that when I'm at a restaurant, I'm very polite to the wait staff, and I tip well, because I believe in this karmic thing about what goes around comes around, right? And so I feel it's important to treat people at all levels of any organization with the respect you would treat the person at the highest level of the organization, right?
Nice.
I feel there's a different kind of higher calling in public education. I feel more drawn to what a public university does for the world, right? And when you think about Berkeley, which is both so academically elite while also being accessible and so large, I can't think of any other place that quite changes lives at the magnitude of this institution, right?
Yeah. So what does it mean to you to be a leader?
A lot of it means being a follower for me. I think that I want to have people, in my world and in my organization and around me who are smarter than I am, because I don't have all the answers. And there are so many good creative people, and I feel like part of my job as a leader is to help bring out the best in the people who work around and with me, right? And I very much value the importance of input from a lot of people. So I leading in many ways to me is about being a good listener, seeking out alternative ideas, sometimes that are in that are not in alignment with where you think you were going as leader, and having the patience to try and stop and understand these other perspectives, right?
So you mentioned that you have your degrees in history. I know they're in history and historic preservation.
Yes.
Yes.
Little theme there.
Yeah. So how do you balance tapping into Berkeley's incredible history? So
Right.
it is our 150th
Yes, here we are.
sesquicentennial, after all, with the need to also be forward-thinking in
Right.
our philanthropic endeavors. Like, how do you balance
Sure.
those? Looking forward, looking back.
Balance is an interesting question. Of course, being a lover of history, I always think that it's good to look back as you think about the future, right? But you can also repeat past mistakes, right? So you want to be open to new ways of doing things and new ideas and to the unknown. We can't necessarily know what Berkeley will be like 150 years from now. Right? It's hard to imagine. You wonder, what are the choices we can make now that set us up for an unknown future, right? That's a really daunting question to ask ourselves. In my world, in the philanthropic world, I will tell you that this is going to get a little granular, but it's real. We have gifts going back to the beginning of Berkeley, right? You've got gifts that help build buildings.
Right.
We've got gifts that created scholarships. Phoebe Hearst gave scholarships to have women come to Berkeley. There were gifts made at that time that still benefit the university. So I think an important part of the work and fundraising right now for us is, what are the gifts we're seeking and accepting that set us up for the greatest success in an unknown future? And our predecessors did it before. So what are the questions we have to ask ourselves and think about, again, with an unknown future as we develop these philanthropic opportunities, especially in the next comprehensive capital campaign, which we hope will go public in 2019. And you need an awful lot of input on that, right? And so for us, the strategic planning process that the campus is going through right now is vitally important to setting the stage for where we need to focus in the capital campaign to prepare Berkeley for the next 150 years. One of the things that we have to do at universities is we're slow to change, right? Yeah. And the philanthropic landscape, the way people give, the way they think about giving, and the vehicles and mechanisms they use to give are rapidly changing. And so I do sometimes worry that we have a tendency to not always keep up with those changes. And we also, we're dealing with an alumni population now at Berkeley of almost 500,000 people, 500,000 living alums around the world.
So we've all heard our Chancellor, Carol Price, talk about, as the state has continued its disinvestment in higher education, that we have to make up for that in other ways. And of course, philanthropy always gets mentioned as part of that statement. So is that daunting to you, or do you see the potential and you're optimistic that those resources really are there that can help offset what we've lost?
Well, I'm certainly optimistic, but in my profession, we're optimistic by nature.
Okay, that's good.
But I'm also data-driven, and we've been doing deep analysis on our alumni population data with the consulting firm Mertz & Lundy, and we can see that there are thousands of alumni out there who have the capacity to make gifts who have not been engaged with campus. So I am very optimistic that having prospects for giving is not Berkeley's problem. That's something that our lead consultant, John Cash, who's also a Berkeley grad, he says that quite frequently, and he's right, the data backs him up. Okay. Where I get more concerned is in the execution of what does it look like then to engage this unengaged population for whom we believe, based on information we can gather, publicly accessible information, have wealth or capacity to make gifts. Mm-hmm. How do we get out there and sort of slice and dice that pool most effectively and with the greatest return on investment? So the thing that keeps me up at night is I know how resource constrained we are as an institution, and so are we putting every dollar we have available for the advancement work to the best use? There's a community of really wonderful advancement professionals, some here in UDAR, some based in the campus units. They have great ideas. They have lots of experience here at Berkeley and at other institutions. So to the extent we can harness the power of their minds to bring the best thinking to how we do this, the more successful we will be. We're in this together, right? And we value stakeholder input at Berkeley, more so than just about any place I've ever worked. I feel optimistic about our ability to row in the same direction.
It's great to hear you say that.
Yeah.
So last question. What are you most grateful for?
Oh, you're going to make me cry. Because last year, probably it was, I guess, a year ago, February 14th, I lost my father. And I'm...
on Valentine's Day?
Yes,
oh.
Which I'll never forget it. I'll always remember what the day was. But I felt incredibly supported by the Berkeley community. And, at that time, Nick was still Chancellor, Carol was interim Provost and Vice Chancellor. They were incredibly supportive, the whole team in UDAR, my colleagues on campus, deans, trustees, alumni, donors. I felt really supported during a very hard time because I'm an only child and I was raised by my dad. He was a single parent. And so you can imagine he was sort of my, both for me. And I'm incredibly grateful for the way that the community supported me. And you sometimes think large institutions, we lose the human touch, but I didn't feel that at Berkeley at all. And it'll be something I'll never forget. And it also reminds me that it's important for us to rally around our colleagues when they're dealing with traumatic things in their life, and we all will, right?
Sure.
And I'm incredibly grateful for my father. I have to say, he was a giver. I learned giving back from my dad. He gave until the end. I can remember looking through his checkbook, and so I was wrapping up his estate, and I could see, Salvation Army, Humane Society, all the things he gave to. And he was a giver, and I learned that from him. The importance of, if you can, you should give back. And so I'm grateful for that.
Nice, thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our Wisdom Café staff audience?
Oh gosh, well, there's always so much to share. I would just say that, we're only going to turn 150 once, and we should all really celebrate and make the most of what it means to be here for this historic moment in Berkeley's history. I really encourage staff to think about finding ways to engage with the 150th, and it's not just wearing the lapel pin, which we're happy for you to do, but
got mine.
Yes, thank you for that. I just think to step back for a moment and think about what it means to be on campus during our 150th, and be proud of that. That's kind of my parting message, I suppose, for Berkeley. And I would say, of course, go Bears.
Well, thanks so much,
Thank
Julie,
you
for sitting down and talking with us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.